Hello, welcome to today's Business Innovation webinar. My name is Yan Yu. I am the Strategic Relationship Manager with IXL Center, and you can see along with me, we have Yulia Kamaskaida here from Global Management Innovation Management Institute, which is our innovation training and certification partner. So Yulia will be the voice of the audience today, and she will help us gather questions from you guys throughout the process. And also we have our today's speaker, Ronald Jonash, who I will introduce very shortly. So today is our second business innovation webinar. The title for today's webinar is Ideas Are Easy, Execution is Everything. I think we all agree that it's often very easy for us to say, hey, I've got a great idea, but it's usually not that easy to bring your innovative ideas to implementation and even further down the road for commercialization. And for big organizations, it gets even more complicated to really make innovation real across the entire enterprise. So what would be the gap in between and how to bridge the gap? At today's webinar, Ron is going to take the next 40 minutes or so to dive into this topic and share with you a wide range of tools and techniques and approaches that you can leverage to really bring your innovation to the next level. And before I officially introduce Ron, just a couple of very quick housekeeping things. Number one, we wanted to make this webinar as interactive as possible. So please jump into the question box here and type in your name, your company name, and your job title and what country you're from. We really want to hear from you. And also, we have Q&A, a couple Q&A sessions in between the presentation. So we really want to get your thoughts and comments here. Again, Yulia will help us gather your thoughts and comments throughout the process. So number two, the webinar is being recorded, as you might know. So if you really need to jump into another meeting or another conference call in the middle of the webinar, please don't worry about it. We will send you the recording afterwards. So with that being said, I would like to take the pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Ronald Jonash. So Ron is really an innovation veteran. He has been in the innovation space for the past 30, 40 years. He is an innovation professor. He has been a visiting lecturer at many universities, such as Rice, Wharton, Columbia, Tufts University, and Holt International Business School. He was a senior partner at Monitor Group and the managing director of the technology and innovation management practice for Arthur D. Little Worldwide. And Ron now is our senior partner at IXL Center, and also he is the chairman of Global Innovation Management Institute. He has written many innovation books and has helped hundreds of organizations create and develop new options for growth through business innovation across the enterprise. So we are very looking forward to learning from Ron today. So without further ado, Ron, I will pass the floor to you.
Okay, thank you, Jan, and welcome everybody. So there's two major objectives today. One is to introduce what we've been researching and following, which is the evolution of what we call Innovation 4.0 and the tools that are associated with that really allow you to make innovation real and to drive it much faster to market. And then we want to introduce several programs and incorporate these tools that kind of give you the opportunity to experience them real time. So those are the two objectives. As Jan said, we've been kind of in this space for a long time. We've seen the evolution as innovation has moved from R&D to technology to product service offering, now to business innovation, and now with kind of the digital transformation affecting all players in the economy, it's moving to what we call Innovation 4.0. So as an agenda, we want to talk about some of the key drivers of business innovation, and particularly high performance business innovation, and then the three major areas that have always been key to innovation and how those are changing with Innovation 4.0. So that's where to innovate, which is the strategic dimension, how to innovate and win, which is the operational dimension, and how to make innovation sustainable over the long term. And then we'll talk a little more and get any questions you might have about these emerging approaches that are called Innovation 4.0. So key drivers, as most of you are aware, I'm sure, it used to be that successful innovations were largely driven by what the offering was, what the product service offering was. But increasingly, as a multitude of people have looked at what creates success and high performance in this area, it is product service offering, but it's at least 4 other major things. How is it produced? What's the business model? How it's delivered? What's the customer experience? And what are the kind of segments that are developing? And so all of those together have been called in term business innovation, as opposed to product innovation or market innovation or business model innovation. You put them all together and we call them business innovation. And those who are successful really can achieve what we call the major premiums or values from innovation, which is to be the partner of choice, a great place to work, the company to invest in, and the brand to buy. So that's kind of the overall context as we see people around the world kind of moving through this. And that whole model for business innovation, which I think most people now accept, it's the integration of those things around a winnable business model, is now being affected by 4 things. And so I'd like to focus on those and again, kind of how those are changing. So one is large amounts of data, huge variety of insights, lots of different behaviors of different players. So lots of data or idea fragments or insights. Then the demand for speed. So most of us on this webinar have probably adopted many of the principles of lean innovation, design thinking, and rapid prototyping. And certainly those are key elements of what we call the IXL Innovation Olympics, which I'll talk about a little later. And then thirdly is emerging technologies and the convergence of those technologies. So it's no one single technology, it's all of them coming together in different ways to affect our success of getting to market. And then lastly, and equally importantly, is just bigger and faster disruptions. New players, new behaviors, new rules, new business models. Those are coming at us from all directions. And a lot of the sponsors, in fact, of the competitions in the IXL Olympics are asking either how would I disrupt myself? How are others going to disrupt me? It's all about disruption of one kind or another. So with that, I'd like to pause for a minute and Jan will ask you a little bit about what you see as the barriers to high performance business innovation at your company, and then we'll continue on with Innovation 4.0. Jan?
Jan, we cannot hear you.
Sorry, I was muted. So thank you, Ron. Thank you so much for sharing with us the concept of business innovation and the importance of really going beyond product innovation and technology innovation and market research to make innovation successful. So before we get into the next session to really dive into the tools and techniques and approaches, we would like to ask the audience a question here. What are the barriers to high performance innovation at your company? So we're going to give you about 15 seconds here, and you guys can really jump into the question box and type in your answer. What really prevents you and your team from making innovation successful in your organization. And if you feel like you have been very successful in your innovation journey, would love to share your thoughts and comments. What made the difference for you to be successful. And again, here Yulia will gather the comments and the answers from you guys and read it loud, and so we can really learn from each other.
Thank you, Jan. So we already have a few answers. Felipe is saying that the barrier for their innovation is day-to-day operation scoping time for innovation. So limited resources, time resources for that. Then we have Joe saying that innovation effort is siloed, so that innovation effort is in the hands of the leadership team and not everyone involved in the process. We have Mary saying that it's again about limited resources and time. And Lee would say that we do not have tools that enable everyone to participate in the innovation process.
Wow, great. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing. A lot of great answers. Ron, any comments on that?
No, I think those are answers that we hear very frequently as well, or questions or barriers. I think the tools that are emerging, and so one of the backwards for a moment, the Global Innovation Management Institute is a nonprofit organization that constantly monitors emerging best practices and standards of high performance innovation. So what they've found particularly is that one needs to have tools, first of all, that are understandable to different players. So whether they're from finance or legal or marketing or product development or engineering or operations, they have to be tools that people can quickly buy into, participate in, and understand and communicate the results. So that's one major thing that I think we've seen in Innovation 4.0 is that it has to be a set of tools and approaches that everybody can join in and can join in rapidly. So that they've got rapid feedback, they can look at multiple options simultaneously, so that it doesn't take a great deal of time. There's not a lot of lost time in terms of waiting for one party to do something or somebody else. So I think the ability to work in parallel, to work quickly, to test quickly and move on is a key element of the kind of emerging tools that people are beginning to use. Anything else, Julia, in the comments?
No, not at the moment. I believe we can move forward with the webinar.
Okay. And if there are more comments, we'll be glad to send out responses to them after the webinar is finished. So thank you. So now let me go a little bit more into the 3 key competencies that companies have recognized, I would say forever, at least for the last 50 years that I've been involved in this space. So one is the strategic dimension, as we mentioned. That's really the question of where to innovate. And so that area, companies and organizations have moved beyond individual products and services, individual needs, to kind of growth and innovation platforms. So a platform that can generate a whole series, a whole sequence of different kinds of service offerings through different channels to different market segments produced in different ways. So platforms have become the major thing that people are looking for strategically. And so new tools that have emerged around that are really important. Many of them have been tools that really enable us to identify larger fields of play, connect the dots in terms of business innovation opportunities, as is noted there. So that's one space. That's the choice about where to play. Another space is how to innovate. And that's what's also changed dramatically. It used to be the domain of R&D or product development, and then a little bit more marketing. Now it's really looking at beyond kind of internal organizational behaviors to new partners and business models and ways to drive innovation across the extended enterprise, across the complete value chain. And so people are looking for ways to tie those together and make sure they have innovative solution and partners across all the elements of the value chain and across the ecosystem. Then the last one, some people call it innovation culture, some people call it innovation discipline. It's really how to sustain the innovations that we're launching. So it's beyond kind of linear sequencing and phasing plans to scenario mapping and options so that we're ready and prepared to pivot as soon as conditions determine that. And so companies are currently doing a lot in the kind of scenario planning, option development. So that's where people are kind of focused with a lot of their current tools. Now I'd like to just introduce what is going on with Innovation 4.0. So in terms of the strategic dimension, that's moving to what I know Pepsi is called protocepting. So rapid protocepting and visualization of how a platform could evolve, what products could be launched, what they would look like, what they would feel like to the customer, to the channel, to the company. So, and new ways of visualizing them way beyond PowerPoint, et cetera. So how do you, it's like prototyping, except it's protocepting the entire business concept and the entire platform so that you can really get people excited. I just saw there was a publication out of the World Economic Forum just a couple days ago that said the number one thing that companies are looking for in their employees are both powers of persuasion, which is really what protocepting and visualization is all about, as well as creativity. Those were number one and number two on their list. So I think this fits in kind of well with all that. Then in the innovation capacity area, the how to innovate, again, companies are moving, obviously everybody's moving to new kinds of partners, new kinds of business models. And what's happened there is behavioral economics has come of age. And so combining behavioral economics with conventional innovation approaches has led to what you might call an innovation simulator. It's like a jet flight simulator, except you're simulating the behavior of key people, whether it's the customer, whether it's the channel, whether it's the sales force, whether it's the government, whatever it is, you're simulating how they're going to behave, really understanding, moving way beyond profiling personas and trying to forecast how they'll react, but it's really simulating how partners will see what you're trying to do in terms of win-win value propositions, and then really converting it into powerful stories. And lastly, in the third area of discipline and how to sustain it, it's moving to what we call dynamic road mapping and gamification. So beyond traditional linear road mapping, it's just like you would navigate a road system in the middle of winter storms or events of various kinds. So you're always having to change your course, change your speed, take a different road, take a different mode of transportation. And so dynamic road mapping is akin to that, but in the innovation space, because there are so many different kinds of competitors emerging from so many quarters, and you really need to be able to anticipate those roadblocks or those speed bumps and kind of move through that. And then gamification, again, is the kind of way that Industry 4.0 and Innovation 4.0 are dealing with that, to really gamify the system and understand what's motivating everybody, what are the rules they're playing by, what are the rules you're playing by, and how can you sustain the innovation going forward. So that's really kind of a kind of high level view of how Innovation 4.0 is beginning to play. A couple of examples. First of all, in the strategic area of where to play, this graphic kind of is a standard one that people use. They're trying to look at idea fragments, how they can put those all together into some kind of platform that looks at what's going on with global forces and markets and your assets, and really develops concepts that become, when you cluster them together, to become platforms. So that's a major difference in the approach that people are taking, and therefore they're needing to deal with lots of data, lots of insights and everything. So that's why the mapping and the software tools that deal with hundreds, if not thousands, of insights and factors comes into play. And as an example of that, people are always trying to figure out how they can get a handle on looking at new platforms that may emerge beyond their current sandbox. So this is the largest agribusiness company in the world, called Bunge, largest soy and wheat farming operations. So they were very focused on feeding humans, but they were looking for different platforms that they could build that could add significantly to their overall growth and to the overall value of the assets they had. So they were looking at some that overlapped with the current sandbox, some that were new. When they looked at ethanol in terms of feeding machines with what they had, they saw a better link through feeding animals. So animal feed became a big thing, a part they're doing. So these are all ways of looking at the richness of new growth and innovation platforms with, again, lots of insights, lots of data that you have to manipulate to figure out where the risk and reward is in these fields of play. So that's an example of kind of how companies are using these, manipulating large amounts of data to find new places to play. The second one, kind of the how to innovate and win, again, companies are looking more and more detailed ways at new partners across the value chain, production, offering, delivery, and markets, and new ways to create value propositions with those companies. And they've been doing that for the last 5 or 10 years. But what's happened now is that the companies are finding that there's lots of different kinds of partners. So this was an example of a large global pharmaceutical company that had been approached by Amazon and others because they're trying to get into pharmaceutical drug delivery. And so this company was trying to figure out how to get alignment between what they were doing and potential large partners, or should they be working with smaller partners or pharmacy chains or whatever who were worried about getting swallowed up by the Amazons and Walmarts of the world. So again, a lot of simulation, a lot of role playing, which the company found extremely valuable just in better understanding the motivations of different partners and the end games that they might get into with these partners. So this kind of simulation is incredibly valuable and really makes innovation real to these companies who are dealing with partners who don't think like a pharmaceutical company. They don't play by the same rules. So again, here's where the simulator or simulation becomes really, really valuable. The last one we talked about was, the last area we talked about was how to make innovation sustainable. Again, there's companies have been thinking of this as a continuous kind of linear process, kind of a pipeline that looks a little more like a Venturi tube in terms of creating demand for things at one end that you're pushing through from the other end, and always looking for multiple products and services and really compelling value propositions. But again, recognizing that things are changing so much and there's so many different players. This is an example of an automotive interior manufacturer who really was very well positioned and was getting lots of demand for customized seating, particularly for the driver's seat, but also just for the front seats in general, and lots of different ways to personalize and customize them. So they had to kind of go through and think about the value proposition and how it was going to affect the written and unwritten rules of the game in terms of what's the value proposition for the OEM, for the dealers, for the consumer, and ultimately, of course, what's the value proposition for the sponsoring company. So again, in Innovation 4.0, if you really can start to gamify that and play it as a game, the client sponsors get a lot of value out of that. The people who are participating in the game gets a lot out of it. And that's where kind of we've moved with a lot of the Innovation Olympics competitions. So with that, I'd like to kind of pause again and have Jan and Julia ask a couple of questions for you so that we can get a better understanding of what you'd like to learn before I wrap it up with some more discussion of each of those three aspects of the specific tools and approaches that we've seen work best.
Yes, Ron. So thanks so much for sharing the framework and related tools on where to innovate, and how to make innovation sustainable. So I think before we dive into the Innovation 4.0 tools and practices, we would love to hear from the audience here on two questions. One is, what tools and approaches your organization is currently using that you think are very valuable? And question B is, what tools and approaches that your organization is not using currently, but you think are important for your team to acquire to really get quick wins and make innovation sustainable? So again, we're going to give you guys this time 30 seconds here, and you can type in your answers and comments in the question box. Would love to hear from you, and then we can also hear from each other, share with your peers, and Yulia here will read out loudly and summarize some of the answers here.
Thank you, Jan. So already
there.
Yes, so already we can see that our audience is applying quite many tools and techniques for managing innovation in their organization. One of which, and the most popular, might be design thinking. Then we can see it's jobs to be done, blue ocean strategy. We have here a couple of answers about the Jim Institute Innovation Management Framework. So we are glad you're using our methodology for that. Lean innovation, TRIS, de-risking, and many others. So seemingly our audience is already applying new tools. Now, in regards of the future tools, what they would like to learn, we see here that people would like to learn tools and approaches for the partnership. Then also the same, what are the tools and approaches to simulate and gamify? So I think that will be the next step what Ron is going to cover. What else you can see here? Yes, so Felipe is saying that they are using Discover In. It's a card game to Inside Discovery. So there are many tools and techniques that are already applied. And in regards of the future, we see that people would like to learn more about gamification, visualization, and simulation, as well as what are the future innovation tools to build the partnerships.
Awesome, thank you, Yulia. And I can see some of the old IXL friends are here, so maybe they, I think they are quite familiar with some of the frameworks and tools we've been using. That's great. Pass it to you, Ron. Any comments here?
Yeah, I think that some of the tools that people have mentioned, like the card games, etc., are addressing something that I think is really important that, again, is being addressed by a lot of the Innovation 4.0 tools, which is to really create tools that are fun to use, easy to use by anybody in the organization and beyond. So you can do it with suppliers, you can do it with customers, you can do it with people from other parts of the organization. It's easy to get engaged, it's fun to play, and yet you're able to make a lot of progress in better understanding what it's going to take to win, how your concept or platform or theme is going to be positioned relative to what others are offering. So I think that's a major thing, major criteria for success in this is it's got to be something that's not only fun for and engaging for people in the innovation space to pursue, but it's something that anybody, as I said, in engineering or sales or marketing or operations can participate in and feel that they can both add a lot of value and take away a lot of value from the experience. So anyhow, so we don't have a lot of time here, so let me go a little bit more into each of the tools. And again, if you have any questions about them, please feel free to send us an email and we'll put you in touch with somebody who can explain them further. But there are these three groups of tools that seem to be clusters of tools and approaches that seem to be becoming key to the new portfolio of Innovation 4.0. So one is the simulator, just to keep it simple. One is the simulator, one is the visualizer, and one is the games. And so the simulator allows you to do rapid and iterative testing of new innovations, new value propositions, offerings, etc. The visualizer enables you to translate whatever you're proposing to do into behavioral and competitive dynamics into business cases, into strategic options, and providing more compelling visuals of what it would look like or feel like. And lastly, of course, is the gamification, which is like multiplayer games. It enables rapid exploration of behavioral and competitive dynamics, business case impacts, etc. So those are the three areas. So if I were to keep it simple, that's the three. If you look at some of the specific examples of how they get used, the innovation simulator, which you can think of is to primarily enable you to look at things in a much faster and cheaper way, and to look at bigger and bolder things that allow you to explore the risks and opportunities associated with that. So you can simulate purchase and use behavior, of course. You can simulate customer or patient journeys. You can simulate collaborative or competitive behavior, stakeholder responses, impacts, and different ways of minimizing risk and maximizing return. So all of those are examples of how people are using simulation in a much more disciplined way in what you could actually think of as an innovation simulator. So there are many organizations now who literally have physical and virtual simulators that they can test a wide variety of things they might do. So that's where simulation, I believe, is going, and why it's so important as we move forward through virtualization and everything that's going on with digital transformation. Simulation is going to be a big part of what determines how successful and how rapidly we can be successful. The visualizer is really recognizing that we have to have a way of communicating the essence of innovations in terms of how they affect behavior and competitive dynamics, et cetera, what they mean in terms of a business case, but visualizing them in ways, everybody has different glasses. Everybody walks with different shoes. And so you have to be able to visualize, and visualization is kind of the true international language. You have to be able to visualize them in ways that everybody can say, I get it. So examples are like action videos in real and virtual environments, dynamic visual maps of how things are going to shift, modeling or acting out of a given concept or platform, playing out different responses, showcasing the impacts, and optimization mapping. So those are all ways that people are looking at significantly enhancing the visualization and communication of results. The last one is what I want to spend a little time on is the Innovation Olympics games. It's not only about gamification, that's actually a way to incorporate simulation and visualization into a single program, which is what we've done with the Innovation Olympics. So the examples here, you're doing role-playing games, navigation games, strategy games, behavioral games, impact games, risk-return games. It's similar to all the games you or your kids play. I mean, it's really putting all of that into the innovation space and enabling people to quickly play that game, change the rules if they want to, but they're rules, and then there's unwritten rules. So how you work your way through that game. So the Innovation Olympics is just one way of kind of integrating gamification into what you're doing in innovation. So with that, I'd like to say a couple things about the Innovation Olympics, just because it's a relatively painless way of experiencing all these tools and getting accelerated results to boot. So this is a program that we've co-sponsored between IXL and the Global Innovation Management Institute for the last 10 years. It's changed a lot as Innovation 4.0 and other tools have emerged. It's become a program that companies can put their most difficult challenges out there. They'll have 5 consulting teams from different graduate schools compete with a lot of diverse points of view to come up with an increasingly powerful set of value propositions and business cases associated with solutions to that program. So each team is pursuing a different solution. The client is heavily engaged in helping decide which solutions they want them to pursue. And this kind of program, which is essentially a Open Innovation on Steroids is, or a hackathon beyond the hackathon, but it's an 8-week sprint, been incredibly successful. And participants, what's happened is we've also found that people really want to get exposed to all these tools. They want to learn about these tools. All the graduate student participants get professionally certified by Jimmy in the process of both learning about the tools and using the tools. Participants from the sponsors can get some of their own staff certified. There's weekly sessions where we go over the detail of the tools that are going to be used in the following week. So it's a very intensive program from the point of view of the graduate student teams. It's a very easy program for the companies to participate in because they really just primarily participate in presentations in a 3-hour kind of set of half-hour presentations that happen every 2 weeks. So these aren't 5-minute pitches. These are in-depth presentations and responses by each team for 30 minutes. So it's a good way to get exposed to them, a good way to get trained in some of them, to decide what you want to pull into your own system, and also, frankly, to also get to watch people compete and decide if any of those people are people you even want to hire as interns or use as follow-on to take things to the next level. So that's the essence of the Innovation Olympics. Again, if you have questions about that, it's a program we run every quarter. As I say, it's been changing every quarter as we've tried to integrate all these new tools into it. But it's a great way to observe it, a great way to participate in it, a great way to get certified in it. So we have found, and certainly the client sponsors have found it to be incredibly valuable. So again, the Innovation Olympics will run from identifying hundreds of insights and ideas that can be put together into business concepts and business cases and then rapidly tested. So that's the essence of a program that's really designed to enrich your innovation pipeline and your innovation portfolio with real actionable solutions. So with that, let me pass it back to Jan and Julia so that we have 10 or 15 minutes here for other questions you may have about these tools or about how to learn about them or how to get trained in them or how to participate in programs with them. But I thank you very much and look forward to any questions you have.
Thank you, Ron. That's awesome. So I think we have about 7 to 8 minutes here for the Q&A. So probably we can take 3-4 questions here. Julia, anything you see here?
Right, so yes, we have quite a few questions here. So some of them are shorter, some of them actually require a bit longer explanation. So Michael is asking, what software is used to gamify and create simulation?
So there's the approach that's used right now in gamification is primarily to develop really rich profiles of all the different players that are in the ecosystem for whatever it is you're trying to do, so that people can then role play those as if it is a game online. So it's not yet to the stage where there's a standard online multiplayer player game, but it works like an online multiplayer game where you can have people from all over the world who have a role to play. They're playing a different party in it, and they all have a similar objective to win in this innovation space. They have different personas that they are acting out, and so that's the nature of the gamification as it exists today. There are a lot of people working on literally trying to put those into games where you can quickly adopt the profiles of the different players. But right now it's kind of just on the cusp of being kind of automated as an actual software game.
Thank you, Ron. So another question related to the previous one is how does IXL Innovation Olympics integrate Innovation 4.0 tools and approaches?
So that, as I kind of alluded to, is done through we provide weekly seminars for all the participants and for people from the client organization, and we run through um, examples of how they can use the tools in the following couple weeks. So they're staged in accordance with how far they're getting with the evolution of solutions. So the tools are presented, examples are presented, and then cases are used within related to the specific challenge about how they could use that tool to accelerate what they're trying to do. Because many of these teams, like in a team within a company, they're teams with people from different schools in the university. They may be in different locations, so it has to be tools that they can quickly take up, they can learn about together, they can use together online. So it's these weekly seminars, it's the professional certification, and it's the coaching. So every team is getting professional coaching throughout. Every week there's intensive coaching sessions where the experienced coach is helping them implement those tools.
Okay, thank you. So now another question which is at the core of today's topic, how to make innovation real. So the question is where to start? What is the first step in innovating and making innovation real?
Well, so in that area, we kind of, I guess, drink our own medicine. We really believe in experiential learning. This is not something you can buy a piece of software and just use it, uh, or read a book and learn about it. You actually have to do it. And so the easiest and fastest way is to have one of your teams that's working on a project right now pull up some of these tools and actually use them. We can help coach those teams. We can add people on those teams from these university teams or whatever, so that you can augment the teams. But it's truly pick an example and learn about how much faster and better these tools are going to enable you to reach solutions that are not only compelling solutions, but they're compelling to everybody in the organization. I think, as the title of this session said, it's not that we lack good ideas. We have to have very persuasive tools and understanding tools that allow us to simplify what is clearly a complicated and ambiguous kind of space. And so these tools, you have to kind of actually kind of apply them. And I think that the best way is to pick a challenge, pick a problem, pick a barrier you face, and use them to work through that, either with some expert coaching, or the best way really is, we have found, is something like this Innovation Olympics program, is to have 4 or 5 teams compete using these tools to come up with a solution for you. So whether you do that on your own or whether you do it through the program that's sponsored by the nonprofit Global Innovation Management organization, or how you do it, but it's to just pick an area and try it. Just do it. That's the way you're going to learn.
Thank you. And so maybe the last question, because we have time restriction. Thanks for everyone who are asking. But if you, as Ron mentioned, if you have further questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us and send those questions along. So with that, it was mentioned that in a certain company of our client, they are working in silos when it comes to creating innovation and making innovation real. So now the person is asking, how would you use tools and approaches that you introduce to break these silos?
Well, as I kind of mentioned earlier, the tools were actually designed to be functionally agnostic. So they should be equally understandable to somebody in sales and marketing, or someone in product development and engineering, or somebody in operations, or someone on your board. So they've been designed with that in mind. And so they're very powerful when you're working with teams that have people from those different disciplines, because as opposed to bringing their own tools, their own marketing tools, their own black tools or whatever from economics or finance, they see the power of these tools as enabling a broad team of people to come to consensus about what to do and particularly how fast to do it.
Great, thank you so much. So Jan, maybe you can take now over.
Yeah, so we really wish we could have more time to answer all the questions here. I can see there's some unanswered question here. As we promised, we'll follow up with you and definitely reach out to answer your questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think we will definitely follow up with you. We will send you the webinar recording, and we can send you a couple of bullets that we have that incorporate some of the tools we shared today. So stay tuned, and we hope to see you in the next webinar. So in the next webinar, we will have an amazing session again to introduce amazing topic, which is bionics and mostly around digital transformation. So please sign up, and we hope to see you soon. Have a great day. Thank you, guys.